Hello everyone, my name is Jose Manuel, but everyone's called me Cote, but I would say that this is the first time that my official name is Cote, which is a Chilean nickname when you're called Jose. And here I will present some examples focusing on how to hack systems and then how to use them to have thinking on climate change. But I will start from the beginning. So where this story started. So my background is business and economics in a weird career that we created in Chile that is commercial engineer, like business and economics. And while I was studying with 3 other classmates, we decided to move from our houses to live into a low-income community. Partially because we were actually volunteers in different NGOs, but we realized that we didn't want to be anymore the hero on the relation, and we want to be just part of the community. And living there, I was personally in charge of cooking and buying everyday stuff from the mom-and-pop stores, the almacenes, that we had in front of our house. So this is where you can find in almost all the Global South the same type of store, where it's like a family business owned, the shopkeeper is a neighbor, a small shop, some of them they grow. But there have many things that are quite unique in this space. First of all, it's where all the communities come, and all the community bonds are forged. So that's where we started having all the relation with the neighbors. But also, because we had low income, I was forced to get the smallest presentation of product, such as cooking oil, laundry detergent, dish soap, etc. Comparing with my family, for example, that was getting like 5 liters of cooking oil, I was forced to pay the smallest one. And after doing some analysis, per kilo, per liter, the cost was between 40 to 50% more. And my first step into what today is Algramo is to put a name on this problem, which is called the poverty tax. Normally, we have been seeing this for many years, but the thing that we've seen in the opposite way. So if we're purchasing in larger scale, we're asking for a discount, no? Well, most of the consumers, they cannot purchase on a large scale, so now we are suffering this poverty tax because we cannot pay the larger amount. And in this space, then I realized that that packaging, most of that extra cost was explaining for the packaging itself. I know today, for example, on dish soap, the smaller presentation, the packaging costs more than the liquid that goes inside. So what absurd is that situation? So we're forcing the lowest income consumers to pay more per liter, per kilo, for a packaging that will last 500 years in the same neighborhood. So if we put the problem this way, it's totally absurd. So at that moment, I decided to do something about it. To be honest, I wasn't looking forward to be an entrepreneur. My idol is not Steve Jobs. That wasn't my career. But I realized that it was a huge problem and no one else was doing something about it. And I decided to do something. And I created my first prototype in Windows Paint. Of course, I'm not a designer. But my idea was to envision what I wanted to do. So I tried to do a drawing of these candy machines that you put some coins on it and then you get the candy. My idea was to start with powder detergent. Why is that? Because it was the biggest difference per format and it's really expensive. And actually, that's why the company is called Algramo, which means by the gram. In the beginning, people, they thought that I was selling drugs in the neighborhoods. But then they realized it was detergent. It helped me to get engaged with the neighbors. But after this prototype, I actually won the first contest with Algramo, with Social Lab, actually here with Matias and the team. They helped me to support the first prototype of this, of moving from the paint to the real world. This is a wooden dispenser on my parents' place. I installed this machine and it was the first time that personally I moved from the drawing to the real world, the real consumers. So in the beginning I had to convince the shopkeepers to allow me to be in their stores. They thought that this was my thesis for the university, which was a lie. But they helped me to start moving and to start showing that people will be willing to change their behavior. The first barrier that I had, they were saying, okay, this is owned by Unilever, this market, people is not going to change their behavior, they're not going to return the packaging, etc., etc. And the point of this was to reduce the cost of living for the communities, reduce the need for a new packaging, and also offer a business for the shopkeeper and for myself. Then, because I'm not an engineer, I didn't know that powder detergent absorbs humidity like salt. So all the product got stuck in the machine. I had like 20 machines, all of them with product stuck. So then I moved those machines into food dispenser, rice, lentils, chickpeas, and beans. And I started working with a returnable packaging for laundry detergent, which today serves like 3,000 mom-and-pop stores in Santiago and in the outskirts of Santiago as well. So still operating and running. But then, and this when I was quite crazy at that time, where we were working in the north of Santiago in a place called La Pincoya, which is a really low-income area, and we were installing the first dispenser machines, and we want them to have internet for the dispenser, to have the dispenser online, etc. And we realized that they didn't have internet at that place, and the whole neighborhood didn't have internet, which was crazy 10 minutes away from, I don't know, the downtown of Santiago. So we're not talking about in the middle of the Andes, we're talking about the city. There were these places called red zones, where the companies, they didn't know or they didn't want to offer their services because people, they were stealing the cables, they were saying, and they didn't have a way to offer their solution. And with my partner at that moment, we say, okay, if we have this network of shopkeepers, why don't we use them to provide internet connection? Why? Because first of all, the shopkeeper is a neighbor, so they respect them a lot. And secondly, we're doing without cables, so point-to-point sharing and illuminating the neighborhood with Wi-Fi. So we create something what's called Alcom. We create a telco to offer internet, and actually we reached like 1,500 families with internet. We were cheaper than the other companies, and we use all these stores to illuminate different neighborhoods. So we were the main provider of internet in that area. Two guys just using a shopkeeper. We were making money out of this business, and with a different perspective, we realized that the problem wasn't the cable, it was the way that we were approaching the community. Long story short, that after yelling a lot to the telcos here, they decided to put fiber in all the communities, and all of them, now they have the cheapest internet of Chile, but they solved the problem at the end. The thing is, I want to share this example that how with a different perspective, you could hack something that someone else from the desk on the Excel sheet, they could say, okay, this guy, or they don't have the money to pay this, or it's too dangerous, but there's always a way to solve the problem. And this led me to the other example. Some years ago, like 5 years ago, Javier Vega approached me, a Chilean, to create the Algramo of medicine. Because we had, and we're still having a problem, two problems actually. One, the market in Chile is really high concentrated from 3 or 4 companies, they own the market. And secondly, if you want to purchase, for example, let's say 3 pills or 8 pills, you cannot do it. You have to purchase the full box. In many countries, this is already a solution, but in Chile it's quite weird. You cannot purchase per pill, you purchase the box, which is really expensive at the end, and then some of them they expire and they need to throw them away, etc. So we're thinking, okay, why don't we hack this market? So why don't we create a total different business? Today, the pharmacies, they pay the most expensive corners to be the closest to your house, then they charge all of that cost into the price of the medicine. We said, okay, why don't we are a digital pharmacy with one store, which is this one, and we serve not only Santiago, all the areas where they don't have any pharmacies. I don't know if you know, but in Chile today, there are 50 municipalities that they don't have any type of pharmacies. They don't have access to it. And we say, okay, why don't we have a relation with the local community? We offer them online, and we deliver all the medicine 1 day per week, because at the end, the consumer is chronicle, and they're purchasing the same every month. So why don't we have one shipment, and then we reduce all the cost of shipment, and we have one coordination with one place. And the first pharmacy that we launched was the most difficult one in Cabo de Hornos, which is the southest place in Chile. And with that, we proved that we were reducing the price. First of all, bringing access. So we were the cheaper because we were the only one. But also we were cheaper than the chains in Santiago. So put the medicine into the Cabo de Hornos was cheaper than the biggest chain in Providencia in Santiago. All of that, again, with a different perspective. So this something is not rocket science. It's an e-commerce, some delivery, having some knowledge on the industry, and we did it. Today, Fracción is covering 7 municipalities that they don't have any option as a pharmacy. And in the next 3 years, they're going to be covering the 45 that are left without any pharmacy as a purpose and making money out of it, which is also important. This is not an NGO. So we have margins, but we have a different way to make business with a purpose on it. But again, we're in the south of Chile, and Chile as a whole produces 0.24% of the global emissions. So whatever we do here could be a nice example, but we're not going to move the needle if we stay here. Yesterday, actually, in part of the conversation, they were saying, okay, what we could do from the Región de los Lagos if we are not in Santiago? And I was telling them, the world, first of all, doesn't know anything about Chile. And Chile as a whole, it's almost nothing on the map. So there's not a difference between Santiago and Los Lagos. We are really small wherever we are in Chile. So we need to think globally. And working with Algramo, I realized that we were producing only 0.24% of the emissions. But I wanted to change the industry, so how I could move the needle. So who was producing the volume? And I realized that today the biggest producers are the main brands that we're consuming. And with Algramo, I was working only on the mom-and-pop stores with my own white-label brand. But then I realized that, to be honest, in the beginning they were my enemy, but now they're my allies, because I realized that there's no way to solve this problem without the big players and without collaboration. For me, it was quite easy to have them being the enemy, was quite comfortable for me. But then I realized that was quite absurd, because at the end, we're in the same boat, and if we don't change the biggest players, we're not going to solve the problem. And then I start to think, okay, how we could convince the biggest players, the biggest brand, and the consumers. Because today, and actually yesterday I mentioned this, the problem that we have is not about money or technology, to be honest. We don't need two more Elon Musk, and the problem is going to be solved. I would love to be in that situation. It would be quite easy, but it's not. The problem that we need to solve is consumer behavior. And that is quite challenging. So how we could do that? And I start thinking, okay, if we have a problem with packaging, how we could make people fall in love with their empty bottle? That was my weird question. Because at the end, that's the problem. When we have a packaging that's full of product, we love it. But then when it's empty, it's someone else's problem. But it's exactly the same product. And actually, we have plastic that we love. I bet that all of you have one today in your pocket. We have plastics that we care of. And we actually return home if I don't have my debit card. But it's a plastic that as a society, we decide to say, okay, this is going to have a chip, it's going to be connected with this, and I'm going to be working this way. It's a piece of plastic, same as the bottle. So I start thinking, okay, why don't we transform the packaging something else? Not just a way to have the product inside, but also as a society, we have a different relation with it. And we create what we call today the packaging as a wallet, which is a packaging with a chip, could be RFID or NFC, links the user with the packaging and with their Algramo account. They could use that to pay, but also they could get rewards into the chip for the next purchase. We could offer the traceability in terms of impact, but also traceability in terms of quality for the brands. And with this, I convinced Unilever, which was my first enemy in the beginning, now my main partner, and offering their product in the Algramo system, in the Algramo way, to call it some way. With this, today, we're connecting different type of packaging and brands into a reusable solution with dispenser machine. So this was the first model, and I have been testing many things. Most of them didn't work that well. Some of them are still working, but I have been trying everything almost everywhere, and always with the same concept. So how we have changed the relation between the consumer, their packaging, and as a society means packaging for us. So I started working, and actually we're still working with Unilever, with Coke, with Walmart, and we recently signed with Nescafe to convince them to offer their products in a different way. And this is quite relevant. Especially the Global South cannot pay or pay premium for sustainability. Normally, the sustainable solutions are more expensive. But in Algramo, we always say that people cannot decide between their planet or their pocket. Must be cheaper. So I had to convince these guys to change their supply chain, to offer products in a different way, and to make it cheaper, to give a reward to someone that is returning the packaging. But remember in the beginning that packaging was representing almost 40%. So there are efficiencies in this way and in this model. So how we're going to share that savings. And I have been working in different places. This is Indonesia, where we launched with MBU, a Dutch NGO. We had a partnership. And we work with Unilever and Nestle there, still running, but a totally different adaptation of Algramo. This is in the UK with Lidl, the retailer, the German. Now it's launched in the UK and in the Netherlands as well, but always the same concept. So using a reusable packaging, getting a discount to change the consumer behavior, offering them a reward. In Chile, during COVID, we launched this system, which was quite bizarre at that moment. This is like an electric tuk-tuk with a couple of dispensers on it. We're bringing to the user's place the tricycle to refill different bottles. Then we moved that into the retail space. This is what we launched last year with Coke. So, for example, today when you're purchasing a can, It's like $1.2, more or less, the cost of it. With this solution, they're paying like 90 cents, like 30% cheaper, only refilling a cup. Coke already had an amazing dispenser on the McDonald's, on the restaurants, but we're not using it the same way. So we're transforming today what was there, we hack it, and we transform that into a self-service solution. And today we're serving some university, offices, and actually we're going to be launching the same with Nescafe. And this is where we installed the solution that was original in the tricycle. We moved that into Walmart. We're working with Walmart with their white label brand and with Unilever as well. But my 4 endpoints, and I have 4 minutes, so it's perfect. First, I would have the point that tech is a tool, it's not an end. I feel sometimes that we are really focused on just the technology for the technology. The main question would be how you're going to use the technology. When I start with Algramo, and actually Algramo, I would say it's 90%, community knowledge. Selling in bulk is the first way in the world. When I present this in many countries, they're still in bulk. This has disappeared for 2 reasons in Chile. First is the hygienic condition of the product, so people was touching the product. And the second one, that was people was following brands. So marketing came, and everything was branded. And today when someone is purchasing a Coke in a neighborhood store, the neighbors say, oh, he has enough budget to buy a Coke. So it means something, gives you like a lifestyle. So I thought, okay, how we could make bulk sexy again? And that's how I thought about Algramo. Algramo is just taking what was already in the neighborhoods with some technology, using the technology, but with the purpose of eliminating the poverty tax. The second one, especially on climate, to be really honest, we are not going to solve anything without public policy. And this is something quite relevant. We cannot still waiting for governments, companies, users to make us like a favor and save the world. This is not going to happen. I realize that I have been working with the biggest brands, and now I'm more involved in the United Nations on some negotiations. I realize that public policy is a key factor. Otherwise, we're going to be late. We're late, but we're going to be later. So this is something that is not that sexy sometimes, but it's needed, and that must be part of the conversation. The third one is the Global South. So most of the time, the solutions are coming from universities, Silicon Valley, we're seeing like the European rich countries. But I would say that today we have a huge knowledge base from the cultural knowledge of the neighborhoods in the Global South. Algramo itself, it's just coming from the almacenes. It's not something coming from the university where I study. So actually, Alcom was coming from the neighborhood store as well, and it's a telco. So at the end, I want to change the perspective on the solution is always somewhere else. So if you're from Los Lagos, it's in Santiago. If you're from Santiago, I don't know, in Silicon Valley. Always somewhere else. There's always knowledge somewhere else. But probably in front of you, there's amazing solution, but you need to change your perspective. And I would say that's the most radical thing to do, to see differently. And it's not that easy because we're not trained to do it. So that's I would say, that could change the way that we see our communities. So maybe, I don't know, the native people or the shopkeepers or, I don't know, your neighbor could have an amazing knowledge, but you haven't seen them in the way to appreciate that. And you're always thinking on where I could put blockchain on this. And I feel that sometimes that's the feeling today. So we're trying to put technology on everything without a reason. And I would say first we should define what is the richness of what we have in front of us. And maybe we don't even need the technology for that. And the fourth one is purpose. I would say that to solve the problem that we have, people has to fall in love with the problem because the road is really tough. Today, we don't have huge unicorns on climate tech solutions because the challenge is huge. So you need to have a company to have social impact, environmental impact, and also make profits. So it's a huge task. And I would say I love to do it, but I am still doing it because I really fall in love with the problem. It's really cliche, but I think it's quite relevant. Because sometimes people think, especially new generations, that we're going to save the world from an app at home. So if I download a different app, we're going to solve all of the problem. And this is much more complex than that, gets much more than that. And I would say that if we really want to change the world, to hack the world, we need to fall in love with the real problem. And just to end, and to be aligned with my 20 seconds, and now I would like to invite everyone to think differently. The example that I'm sharing, none of that could be invented 40 years ago. All of that. without any reason. It's just a different perspective. And normally the knowledge that we're thinking that's always somewhere else could be in front of you. I would say that's the only way, first of all, to appreciate where we're coming from, to be proud of it, and always use technology as a path to have an impact. Thank you.